Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Monday, the 3rd of July. I'm Aidan Macdonald and today I'm joined by Tony Haggerty. Tony, how are you?
I'm very well. Good morning, everybody. Yes, all good, Aidan. Happy Monday. Celtic back in pre-season training. Yay! All good.
We'll get into that shortly. Just before we start, a wee bit of housekeeping for anybody that's interested. Ticker tape down below's got our current subscription deal that's running. It's £12 for 1 year's worth of access to the website. So that will get you scouting reports from people like Stuart Ross, tactical and data analysis from Alan Morrison, Duco James, big interviews from Tony, such as the one he conducted with a couple of Greg Taylor's coaches and a former teammate, which is available on the site. I think it went live this morning. So all sorts of content available in there if it interests you guys. £12 for 1 year's access. It's part of a 5-day flash sale we're running, and it concludes tomorrow, I believe. So if that interests you, can go to www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. So, Tony, as you mentioned, our Celtic are back in pre-season today.
Yeah.
That'll be a return for the majority of players. Obviously, there'll be some guys that were on international duty. You'd imagine will get a wee bit longer. So, Callum McGregor, Greg Taylor, Alistair Johnson probably as well, but a good chunk of the squad will be back in. Or it's always kind of exciting. You'd imagine there'll be some sort of social media coverage from Celtic. Obviously, a couple of years ago we got the famous mic'd up video from Ange. I don't know if we'll quite get anything like that, but you'd imagine there'll be some sort of content filing about, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, they always do it. They do it well, actually. Celtic TV and stuff like that. Celtic Media in the first day back. Hopefully we get some mic'd up content. It'd be good to hear the thoughts of Brendan, wouldn't it, on the training ground. Also to see who's there. Always kind of, you're always interested in who's back, who's not there, and possibly who's coming in. I mean, there has to be new people coming in, maybe not at this moment in time, but certainly I'm expecting a busy couple of weeks now, Aidan, to be honest, in terms of incomings and outgoings in that sense. But yeah, when they get back to pre-season training, you get that buzz again, don't you? You're kind of like, yes, here we go. It's all kicking off and starting up again. So fixtures were out on Friday, so I think everybody's got their appetite back, and football can't come back quickly enough. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what players are there, players that aren't there. Obviously, you mentioned international ones; they'll obviously get a extended break. But yeah, exciting. Just can't wait for the new era to get up and running.
I'm sure people will be sort of eagle-eyed looking to see if Jota and Hatate, etc. there, whether or not Celtic will give anything away on that department. I have a feeling that might be either carefully shot or they just won't be in any of the footage, Tony, to be honest, as it kind of tends to be with these things.
Yeah, there's an air of inevitability about Jota. I think we were all going to accept that at some point he will depart the building, and Celtic will be getting an incredible fee. And from what I've read so far, it looks as if it's going to smash the record transfer fee, which is 25 million paid for Kieran Tierney. But all sorts of reports are saying that could be heading upwards of 30 million. So I mean, he's a tremendous footballer and he's leaving, but it's still a brilliant deal for Celtic. What a coup that is to get that kind of money, and I think they're by rights perfectly entitled to hold out for that kind of money, Eden, because I believe that's what Jota's worth. I said between 30 and 35, but if Celtic got 30 million, then fine. But when people start talking about players playing in the Scottish Premier League or Scottish Premiership for 20 million and above, then you have to start listening. And I think Celtic have done very well to start the negotiations at that, rising to 25. Then they want upwards of 25. It's now probably a deal somewhere in the region of 30 million with add-ons and stuff like that, possibly more. So I'm delighted at that, and well done Celtic for playing hardball as well and getting the best deal for the club. And Jota leaves with everybody's best wishes. We wish he stayed a bit longer, but we keep talking about the generational wealth that he's going to be paid in the sums of money, supposedly somewhere between £192,000 and £200,000 a week, 10 million a year. Aidan, it's with the best will in the world. You're always going to leave if that's the kind of sums that they're dangling in front of you. But yeah, but I think Celtic did their bit as well over the deal, so we expect Jota to, if he's in the footage of the training footage, so be it. But as you say, he won't be there and they're bracing themselves for all sorts of offers for other players, Hatate being one of them. But again, Celtic hold pretty much a lot of the ace cards here, and they can play hardball. And I think everybody's content to see maybe one or two of the big stars leaving, but as long as Brendan Rodgers is going to get fully backed and bring in players of equal quality, if not better. All sorts of rumours over the weekend about various players that could be coming to Celtic, and Celtic possibly smashing their own outlay for a player. So some reports were saying they're going to splash out 12, 16 million on players, so that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens in the fullness of time of that. But yeah, I still want to see that team who have been successful for the past 2 years. Still want to see most of them stick together, Aidan. I said on Friday, he didn't come back for a fire sale, but the players that are going to leave are going to leave for some serious money. But as long as Celtic limit it to one or two, Jota being the first, it remains to be seen who else follows him out the door this summer. But I don't want many more to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree, Tony. I hadn't just touch on a couple of things you mentioned there. Celtic are entitled to be holding out for as much money as possible when it comes to Jota, and if any other players are sold to Saudi Arabia. The fact that somebody like Jota, who has 4 years left on his deal, the money that the Saudis are going to be throwing, it's good to see that Celtic are hopefully going to break their transfer record for him. And I think you had mentioned a couple when the news first came out, that sort of 30 to 35 million range was probably ideal in terms of what Celtic should expect to get, and it looks like it is going to fall in between that if the reports are to be believed. So I guess that's a positive. It's also going to be disappointing to lose Jota. He's a brilliant player. I'm sure he will be difficult to replace, but if Celtic's kind of scouting model is as consistent as it's been over the last 2 years, you'd hope with that and more cash to spend. It's already been reported that Brendan Rodgers is going to have a lot of money to spend this summer, but if we're adding potentially the Jota money to that, whether or not that was kind of forecasted to make up part of that original budget, we obviously don't know, but even if it was, you'd imagine there's going to be plenty of sort of funds for Brendan Rodgers to use, and that'll be one of the key positions they'll need to look to replace, along with filling other roles that we've talked about, like goalkeeper, etc. But yeah, fingers crossed it works out. And I think it's good that these things seem to be moving quite quickly, Tony. You don't want players, similar with Ange, you don't want players, are they staying, are they going? They're going on the pre-season, but maybe they're not committed, or you don't really know what's happening. Always think about back to when somebody I like to mention on this podcast, Tony Musa Dembele left, and there was photos of him in training looking miserable and stuff before he finally moved on to Lyon. You don't really want that situation. I'm not saying Jota would have been like that, but you don't want to sort of allow for that to be a possibility. I think that it seems to be moving quickly as it did with Ange. It's probably not a bad thing as well, just for the whole morale of the squad, etc.
I think everybody needs to know. I think the manager needs to know what he's working with here, and from today onwards, and have some kind of, and there will be some forward planning and preparing for such and such's departure or whoever coming in. There has to be, and there will be. It's been started since Brendan, not even probably before Brendan was announced as manager. I think that's a process that's been happening. Odin Thiago Home was already in the building, and Marco Tilio is on his way. So I think those are guys that you can get excited about as well. I don't think they're projects. I think they're players that are going to fight for a place straight away in the side. And you look at their highlights reel, and both of them pretty good. Particularly excited about Marco Tilio. I think he could be. I think he could be good from what I've watched on the highlights reel, and I spoke over the weekend. If you subscribe to the website or you looked on the website, you would have seen that I spoke to John Maisano about him. John Maisano was very excited, but he was trying to keep a tin lid on it, But he said Celtic have a player, so I think between that's about over 4 million Celtic have spent already, and I'm excited to see what they bring to the table, because they are young, and they're kind of, as we say, young thrusters and eager to make an impression and take their career to the next port of call and an upward trajectory that everybody hopes for. So yeah, I am particularly interested to see what they will bring. But obviously, Celtic and the supporters are waiting for you hesitate to say the words, but like the big marquee signings, even the statement of intent signings and they've been linked with a few players so far. We'll see where that goes. I'm sure Brendan and Mark Lowell are all over it. And as I say, I expect a busy couple of weeks coming up for Celtic, both ins and outs. But I'm hoping that the outs are more of the fringe players that we'll go on to speak about, because I just think a lot of them, I think the race is run at Celtic and the road leads elsewhere. And I think it's time for Celtic to jettison them from the club, and just because we're moving on to a new era, and we have to sort of say, right, enough's enough. It's not worked out. Go shake their hands and go our separate ways.
Yeah, I completely agree, Tony, and I think it's just the way the market is right now. It's going to happen in terms of the way Celtic are at the end of the day. Some people are mentioning in the comments here, they are still a selling club. You get your 2 years of players coming in. Oh, and I know Jota's only been signed for 1 year, but I guess if we count his loan spell, you don't know if there was maybe potential agreements made when he signed on loan with the option to buy that if you come in and you're successful, you have a good year, and then we sign you up, this will count as what the traditional sort of 2 years that we've had for players. I mean, guys have been leaving even sooner on that. Juranovic, of course, Yakimakis, that was 18 month spells, wasn't it, rather than even your traditional kind of 2 seasons. So things are changing. And you're right, Celtic have spent a bit of money already this summer on 2 players that look pretty promising. I'd put your interview with John Massano just in the comments there. It was also released over the weekend. That was a very interesting, detailed sort of analysis of what he can bring from somebody that knows him quite well. So I thought that was an interesting interview, Tony, and I take it you probably enjoyed conducting that as well.
Yeah, he was great. I mean, he's gone on to manage Troyes alongside Patrick Kuznorbo, who used to play for Hearts, for those that remember him. And so he's got an exciting future in coaching ahead of him. And he was sort of saying that what Australians have is that kind of inbuilt ability to succeed, because they've been fighting that kind of ever since he said, just because they don't come from a perceived footballing nation, he says it doesn't mean that the players don't put 100% into it and that football's not their number one sport. So he said you'll probably be surprised by Marco Tilio. He might take time to settle, but once he gets going, he's excited for him. I think he knows that there's the potential there for Marco Tilio to take his career to the highest possible level. He said he'll be the next Australian winger. He said he'll be the next Australian winger for 12 years, he said, for the next 12 years. So that's high praise indeed from someone who's worked with him. So I'm interested in that. That floats my boat a wee bit. And as I said on Friday, I think we accept now that players coming in, managers coming in, I used this phrase on Friday, and it says it's a marriage of convenience. They're there for however long they're there. And I used the Monopoly analogy that they're passing, go and collecting 200. I think we've all got to accept that. But as long as they're here, make Celtic the best club that they can be, and continue that domestic success, and help us get to where we want to go to in Europe. That's all the Celtic supporters can ask now, Aidan, because Brendan Rodgers the first time and Ange Postecoglou this time, and to a lesser extent Jota, who said he fell in love with the club and he fell in love with the supporters. But we have to accept now that these are clinical transactions. But what we do know is the model's working for Celtic, that we are able to get these guys in at the right time, offer them this platform and this showcase, and then it's mutually beneficial. They go for plenty of money when they do eventually leave the club. They commit to long-term deals, and that helps you recoup massive transfer fees. And, like at Olympic, we're going to have to accept the fact that players of Jota's quality, Hatata's quality, managers of Ange Postecoglou's quality might only be here for 2 or 3 years. Brendan's guaranteed that he's going to be here for 3 years, so we'll see that one. But I'm only interested in the future, where we're going and where we're headed. I'm not interested in the past, and I think there's a lot of kind of albatrosses around their neck from the past, in terms of squad and fringe players, that Celtic just have to say, right, that's it, cut off point here. Sorry, there's no future for you at the club. We're moving in this direction. Good luck in the future. Thanks for what you did or what you didn't do or whatever. But I think we have to be kind of ruthless in that sense, and and look at and then have serious conversations. And I'm talking about serious conversations like Sir Stephen Welsh and David Turnbull. I don't know about you, Aidan. I'd be loath to part with them, but I find it hard to see where they're going to fit in at Celtic. But again, they're both Scottish players, so do we need them for the quota for the Champions League? We clearly do. So there's all those kind of questions and conundrums to work out and work on as well. So those two in particular, I don't know if I'm ready to part with them yet, but the likes of Ismaila Soro, who else would fall into that category? The striker whose name escapes me just now, the Swiss.
Aidan Macdonald.
That's the fella. God, I took a memory blank there. Aidan Macdonald, yeah. So guys like that, James McCarthy, we'll have to just cut the losses on them and say, right, end of the road for all these kind of guys, and move forward as a club and not have that hanging over you about what do we do with these guys. That they've not played football for Celtic for a reason. There's better players there, and it's just not happened for them. And I just don't see them having a future under Brendan Rodgers either.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Tony. Whether or not those sort of three you've mentioned, which I know we've discussed quite a lot over the last season or so, Barkas, Ayeti, Sorrow, you'd imagine if it's possible, Celtic might just try and pay them off. I appreciate there's other players that are on longer term deals, such as a Mikey Johnson, etc., that they would either be coming back, going out on loan, or be trying to get a bit of money for them. But I guess that kind of brings on to the main topic of this sort of podcast this morning. And is there any fringe players in the squad, Tony, whether it's somebody out on loan or even some of the names you mentioned, like David Turnbull or Stephen Welsh, that you think could make a mark in pre-season and then sort of be an option going forward for the rest of the campaign? I don't know if there's any names in particular that stand out for you. Maybe because somebody's going to move on, such as Jota, so you feel somebody could come in and fill that position. Obviously, people will be keen that there's a kind of significant replacement bought in the transfer market to come in for Jota, but even in the sort of short term.
I would have thought that Brendan Rodgers might want to look at the likes of Stephen Welsh and David Turnbull for the Champions League Scottish players quota on that alone. So I don't think he would have that conversation whether they necessarily have to move on right now. But McCarthy, Sorrow, and then obviously you've got Liam Scales at Aberdeen. I don't know if Liam Scales might also benefit from another loan spell because I don't see him cracking that Celtic first team picture just yet. So, that I just think that we have to move on from these guys. And they were on long-term deals, but we have to either sever those deals and then look to the future. Because I think it's a new Celtic under Brendan Rodgers. They're going in a different direction. And I think also they're kind of remnants from a past that people don't like to discuss, do they? And it's not their fault. And I'm not saying they're bad footballers. They could do a turn somewhere for someone because they played for Celtic. But it's just not happened at the club. And I think it's time to sort of close the book on that particular chapter for all of those guys. I would persevere with the likes of Welsh and Turnbull. But again, I just don't see them getting much game time. And I don't know if that'll suit both of the players who might, not saying agitate, but might want to move on. And the likes of Liam Scales as well, would he want a permanent transfer? Because he might see the bigger picture as well and say, it's not going to happen for me at the club right now, or maybe Brendan will want to have a look at these guys before he will want to have a look at these guys and make some kind of decision on it. But you just, these guys have been kind of, I hesitate to use the words hanging around the club, but they just seem to be there, don't they? And you think to yourself, wow, they've still got X amount of years left. I think it's just time to sever all that now. If it means paying them up and paying their contracts up and letting them leave, that's fine. I think we have to do that. We have to be a wee bit more clinical and ruthless with that ourselves, Aidan, and take Celtic on to the next chapter.
Yeah, I completely agree, Tony. I think the two that sort of stick out for me are Welsh and Turnbull. Whether or not they have an impact in the squad, you could have a cynical look at things and say the reason they might get kept around is because of the Champions League rule, having so many homegrown players in, which could be a wee bit cynical way of looking at it, but might be true as well. But I think they're the two players that could potentially have some sort of role. Whether or not maybe David Turnbull would benefit a wee bit more under Rodgers' style of play rather than Andrews, I don't know. He does obviously only have 1 year left on his deal, so a decision would probably have to be made. Given Celtic paid $3.5 million for him, at one point he was an important part of the squad. He always chips in with goals and assists. It's not somebody you probably want to lose for nothing. So you would have to say either probably moves on this summer or he signs a extension if he's going to be sticking around.
But you look at Turnbull. Turnbull's still got a lot to offer. And if Brendan Rodgers is adept at getting the best out of players, then Turnbull's one that could be worked on. He has only got a year left, so something has to give there. You either have to offer him a new deal or, you part company. But I don't particularly want to part company with Turnbull because I think he can offer something moving forward. But he's just not going to displace any of the midfielders that are there currently, is he? O'Reilly, McGregor, Hatate, assuming Hatate stays. You've got Odin Thiago Home thrown into that mix now. So it's, you find it hard, and the boy himself might want game time because he's sat on the bench a lot. So there's a whole load of factors there, but I still admire Turnbull as a footballer. I still think he's got a lot of skills in his locker and a lot that can be brought out in him. And if any manager can do that, I think Brendan Rodgers that kind of guy.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he's probably more fighting for a place with Odin Thiago Home now than he is trying to challenge Hatate, O'Reilly, McGregor, etc. It's probably really the second tier of midfielders that he's trying to make sure that he's on top of. But Turnbull could get a game for a lot of teams, Tony, couldn't he? So we know what ability he's had. Set pieces, he's very deadly. He's got a great strike on him. He's passing. He can offer a lot in games. So you'd have to think that unless he's getting some sort of promise made over game time, that he might move on this summer. Just when you touched on earlier about players being a wee, maybe potentially unsettled for a variety of reasons, I thought this was an interesting comment from Hazel Flynn. She said, "Not sure I agree with spending 16 million on one player. We're also discussing about certain targets that Celtic have been reportedly linked with. We'll maybe go into it in a wee bit more detail if the rumours become a bit more concrete over the next few days, but could unsettle the rest of the team, potentially having a standalone star. She would rather have two £8 million players and then asking what her thoughts are on that. Do you agree with that, Tony, or do you think you wouldn't mind seeing somebody come in for 16 million?
Aidan, morning Hazel, how you doing? Hazel, I just want good players at the football club. If we have to pay £16 million for a good football player or a great football player, that sprinkling of stardust that we're talking about, marquee signing, call it what you will, then I'm happy with that. But if we're paying £8 million for two players, then they've got to be good. They've got to be oven ready first team players, and they've got to come in and hit the ground running straight away. Dressing rooms can, the harmony in the dressing room can be disrupted by certain individuals and certain players. I just don't think Brendan Rodgers will allow that. But I think we're talking about markets, and if Celtic are in markets and people are seeing the amount of money that Celtic are recouping for players like Jota, then other teams are going to play hardball with Celtic when you go to purchase them, if you want to purchase them. So again, I think Celtic will have to shatter their own transfer record, which is 9 million that they paid out or shelled out for Odsonne Edouard. So I think somewhere in the next couple of weeks, you might see Celtic go somewhere between 12 and 16 million pounds for a footballer, only because they can, but only because clubs will now see Celtic. They'll look at Celtic as bags of money, loads of money, if you remember that character for the 80s, and they will charge accordingly. So I think if Celtic are recouping and wanting great deals and value for their players, then other clubs are going to ask Celtic to do the same, stump up for their prized assets. And if that's what it is that Celtic are going into the market to get, marquee signings, then I just want good players, because you hear me say it a lot. See, if you sign good players, you end up with a good team. Quite funny that, isn't it, Aidan? So you can't get enough good players in your football team. And I think whatever way Brendan Rodgers is going to play, his system, his style and philosophy, you fill it with good players. And I think he's got his eye on a couple of good players. I don't pay too much attention to price tags, to be honest. I just want footballers that will enhance Celtic, keep this domestic run or domestic success going, and also, and I'll bang on about this until it happens, they get a decent run in Europe and they do become the club that they want to be. And I think we have people in the Celtic hierarchy, people in the Celtic management, and we have a fighting chance because we have a nucleus of a squad that could take you to that kind of level and be a decent European side, a competitive European side. Celtic will win the league title again in their history. There's no doubt about that. But why not, at some point, if you can't win the Champions League because it's very much slanted against you, do what Sevilla did. What's that, 6 times in the last 10 years they won it? Go and have a crack at that, because that's real honour and glory and prestige. There's only 3 European trophies you can win. Go and have a rip at it. Why not? I mean, Seville accept that they're not a Champions League team or a top 3 or 4 team in Spain. But my goodness, what a run of success they've had in Europe by, going hell for leather and making themselves a competitive and brilliant Europa League team, the Europa League specialists. I'm not saying Celtic can make themselves Europa League specialists, but I'm certainly hoping that they can turn themselves into a side, that even on the Europa League stage, where they can hold their own and possibly grab ultimate glory in a competition like that. Even the Europa Conference League, you saw what it meant to West Ham. So I think that's what everybody wants for Celtic. So it doesn't really matter about price tags of players. You just got to sign good footballers, regardless of what price they cost. I mean, they've not shelled out too much for Odin, Thiago Holm and Marco Tilio. You hope that they're good footballers. You look at their highlights reel, they look like good footballers. They look like people who would... Brendan Rodgers has sanctioned it clearly, so they look like 2 players that he hopes he can work with and get the best out of them, and they're young enough and they're hungry enough to want to be a success. So I'm happy with that, Aidan.
Yeah, I think the only thing is, where you were talking about a run in the sort of Europa League, just the way the Champions League format's going to be changing this season coming would probably be the last possible year for that.
Yeah.
If we're assuming that Celtic most seasons are going to be winning the league, or the worst case scenario finishing second and competing for it, it's probably going to be quite difficult, because there's not going to be any drop down when the Champions League format changes to the Swiss style. It's just going to be, you're in the Champions League, you're in the Europa League, you're in the conference. There's not going to be the drop down from the year before. So I think that will make that a wee bit more difficult, just because of the way Scottish football's kind of situated at the moment. Celtic are always going to be first or second, you would imagine. But it would be nice for them to get some sort of run in a competition like that. But we'll just have to play it by ear and see how that goes. Just not long before we finish, Tony, the other thing we wanted to touch on was, I know we were discussing it briefly off air, a Celtic transfer target, Yang Hung-jun, has said he will pay his transfer fee so he can come to the club. He's obviously quite keen to join. He was getting more heavily linked before Marco Tilio joined Celtic, I think it's fair to say. Whether or not he's sort of off the table now, Tilio was maybe the main target. He was another option. We don't really know. He could still join, but he seems to, the rumours have went quiet. But what has happened over the last couple of days is he's sort of made his intentions clear that he wants to join Celtic. He was speaking to South Korean media, and he said, "If the transfer fee isn't enough, I'll give my own salary. I want to go to Celtic this summer. I hope Gang will allow me to transfer. My father and agent have asked for a meeting for several times, but the CEO is not giving his time. It's not an easy opportunity to get an offer in Europe. I only want to go out there this time. My colleagues and seniors from other teams also tell me to go to Europe. I don't think I'm staying in Gangwon right now." It's a bit of a far cry, Tony, from when he was saying he wanted to stay and help the team from avoiding relegation. But he seems keen to obviously move, and we don't really know what's going to happen. Like I say, the sort of reports have went quiet on him, but you'd have to imagine that if Celtic do want to sign the player, then it would be almost a done deal. He's even going to pay the transfer fee, Tony.
Yeah, you feel for him, don't you? He's clearly desperate to go to Celtic. He says he set his heart on a move to Europe. Celtic have asked the question. The club's playing hardball with the player himself, and he's trying to force it through. You can understand it from both sides, don't you? The club want him to stay, and he wants to go. And again, he's clearly an example of an unhappy player, and he's agitating for the move to Celtic. And if the interest is still there with Celtic and they want him, then I would imagine that it would get done. But I think he's kind of I don't know. I was very surprised when I read those quotes yesterday, and but I'll give him his due. That's shows his commitment and his desire to come to the club that he's offered his salary. But these things usually get ironed out eventually, don't they? Because they come to a head. And if the interest is still strong with Celtic, then he will be a Celtic player. Because if Celtic want him, that's what will happen. I think there's a wee bit of sabre rattling just now, isn't there? And just to see foot stomping and stuff like that. And maybe also the club playing a wee bit of hardball and trying to squeeze as much as they can out the deal from Celtic. Again, going back to the fact that people looking on thinking Celtic are now carrying wads of cash and stuff like that. So I think a wee bit of to and fro. But if the interest is still high, then Celtic, he will be a Celtic player. It'll be some point in the summer. I don't think Celtic would let it drag out to January, to be fair. I think they'd rather walk away than become part of some kind of saga like that.
Yeah, I would agree, Tony, and I think the fact that you touch on the unhappy player, that's not a situation you want at Celtic, and so far it doesn't really seem to have been the case. The majority of players, I know Yakimakis was maybe that dragged on a wee bit longer, and there was, a few comments on Instagram, etc. But outside of that, guys are getting their moves really when it's happening at the moment. Jota looks like that's going to go through relatively quickly, and Ange, for example, as well, moving to Spurs quite quickly. So I don't think you want a situation as I compared it to Dembele during Rodgers' first spell, because it's just not healthy for the squad, not healthy for the player or for morale, etc. But we'll have to see what happens with Yang, whether or not he does pay his own wages and his own transfer fee if he joins us. Maybe another discussion. But just before we finish up, Tony, I just want to touch on also the women's team has lost kind of two key contributors from last season. Quite a lot of players have actually moved on since the transfer window opened, but the two that have probably caught everybody's eye, Natasha Flint, who was vital for Celtic last season, particularly in those two matches that Celtic part at the end of the campaign. She was one of the, and she got player of the match in both those games actually. She was sensational, even though Celtic didn't win the league. She played a vital part in making sure the title race did go to the last day, and at one point they were set to be crowned champions. She's moved on. She's went back to Leicester, I believe, who she was on loan from. Obviously, she seemed to be really embracing the club and that. It showed you her and her partner were at the trophy day celebrations, etc., which was really nice to see. And yeah, it's a shame she's moving on. Also, as well, Jacinta, it's been announced she's leaving. I don't think it's been confirmed where she's moving on to, but being at the club for 2.5 years, obviously was another influential player for Celtic, and that's also going to be two players that will be hard for Fran Alonso to replace for next season.
It's a big blow for Fran Alonso and Celtic women's team. They were major parts of Celtic's success, weren't they? People putting two and two together and saying if Jacinta's off, Carol Starfelt off as well. So you need to wait and see what happens with that. I wouldn't have thought so. To be honest, I would have thought Brendan Rodgers will want to keep someone like Starfelt. But yeah, I mean, Fran Alonso, looking at that, they were huge players for Celtic. Natasha Flint and Jacinta, and it's a massive, massive blow to the Celtic women's team, losing both of those key members of the personnel. Are they replaceable? I guess like everything else, your scouting system is going to have to go out and find replacements for them, but it leaves a big void, doesn't it, in that Celtic women's team, because the two of them were excellent, and really embraced it, didn't they? They loved it, and it was one of those weekends where I think Celtic were trying to bury bad news, weren't they, in terms of the women's team, where it kind of doubled done up with the two of them leaving. And I get Natasha Flint was on loan, but I thought they might have pulled out all the stops to try and get her to sign a permanent deal. And the Jacinta one just kind of came from left field as well. But wish them all the best. They were terrific contributors to Celtic women's team, and just unfortunate that they were a injury time goal away from winning the title.
Yeah, it was a shame the way it happened that day, and like I say, they were both two key contributors to the title race actually going to that final match. And yeah, they will be difficult to replace. You need to hope that the scouting system is going to be able to go out and bring in players of a similar quality, which is never easy. And I think with Natasha Flint, it maybe was a bit disappointing that Celtic weren't able to retain her sort of services for even another year, maybe on loan. But I'm unsure in the exact wage structure that would be in place when she was moving from down south. So maybe it was out of Celtic's wage budget. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah,
Possibly.
it was a shame to lose those two key players. And Fran Alonso's got a big summer. He already had a big summer. He's got a big summer ahead into, just like Brendan Rodgers. But I think I will leave it there for today, Tony. Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll say pre-season Celtic back today. I'd imagine there'll be some sort of content coming out that we'll be able to discuss over the next few days. The pre-season games will then be heating up. Trip to Japan. There's also James Forrest's testimonial as well, ahead of course, the league starting on the 5th of August at home to Ross County. So we've plenty to discuss, I'm sure, Tony, over the next few weeks.
We'll be here every day to do that.
Well, indeed. Guys, thanks very much for joining me. Tierney. Tony, thanks very much for joining me.
I'll take that. Cheers. Take care. Have a happy Monday, guys. See you tomorrow.
Cheers, guys.